Baruchim Habaim. Welcome to Temple Emanu-El of Haverhill for our Kol Nidrei service this evening. I'm Cantor Vera Brookhuizen. I serve here as spiritual leader. On the bima with me are Shaliach Tzibur, Phil Platkow, and our rabbinic intern, Elisheva Pripas. And we are graced this evening by the music of both David Collins, our collaborative pianist, and Sarah Freiberg-Ellison, our wonderful cellist. It is a joy to have you here with us, both here in front of me in person, on Zoom, on YouTube. Thank you for joining us for this holiday. I want to invite you, if you are on Zoom, please use the chat to say hi to each other. Connect in whatever ways feel good. If there is some kind of a technical issue and you need the attention of our Zoom technician, please send a message to the Temple Emanu-El account so that she can see it and respond to it. We are broadcasting this service live onto YouTube, and also thank you HC Media. It's on channel 22. So welcome to everybody who is joining us via the TV as well from home. We also have a special message for all of you this evening from our Temple Emanu-El Board of Directors, a holiday message. Let's listen to it.
Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Le'olam.
So this should be the greeter video from the Board of Directors. There we go.
I wish all of our temple members a happy and healthy new year. I look forward to the time where we could all be together back in the building, and that you and your families have a sweet and joyous new year. Happy New Year to you all.
All right, this is past President Lynn Martin wishing you a sweet new year. Shana Tova.
Lishana
Tova.
And we begin our service tonight before our liturgy starts up, acknowledging the land on which this temple sits. Located on the traditional lands and waterways of the Abenaki, the Pennacook, and the Wabanaki peoples past and present, we acknowledge and honor with gratitude the land itself and the people who have stewarded it throughout the generations. Before Kol Nidrei begins, the Torahs come out to share their light with us, and so that we can share our light with them. And so as our choir leads us in Or Zarua, I call up Karen Godek to open the ark, and we will bring the Sifrei Torahs down and around so that everybody can be a little bit closer to them before we enter the Shiva Shel Mala and the Shiva Shel Mata, the heavenly and the earthly courts. As we convene our side of the joint heavenly and earthly court tonight, please rise in body or spirit, and please turn to your supplements, page 19, as Laura Fleeter leads us in this reading.
All vows, all promises and pledges that we have made to ourselves that no longer serve for the good, may their grip be loosened, that we be present of mind and heart to the urgency of the hour.
We turn now to page 398. Bishiva shel mala uvishiva shel mata al dat makom ve'al dat kahal anu matirin lehitpalel im ha'avaryanim bishiva shel mala ובשיבה של מטה על דעת המקום ועל דעת הקהל אנו מתירים להתפלל עם העבריינים בשיבה של מעלה ובשיבה של מטה על דעת המקום ועל דעת הקהל אנו מתירים להתפלל עם העבריינים Kol Nidrei Vesarei Vacharamei Vekonamei Vechinoi Vekinosei Ushevu מיום כיפורים זה עד יום כיפורים הבא עלינו לטובה כל יום איחרת נבון כל הון שרן שוויקין שוויתין בתהילין ובוטלין לשרירין ולקיימין נדרנה Kol Nidrei Vesarei Vacharmei Vekonamei Vechinoyei Vekinosei על נפשתנו מיום כיפורים זה עד יום כיפורים הבא We continue on page 400, and I want to ask those of you who are with us to please help us maintain pikuach nefesh by keeping your masks on. If you need to take a mask break, feel free to step outside. Nobody will worry. You should be comfortable, but please keep them on. Thank you. Page 400. ונשלח לכל עדת בני ישראל, והגר הגר בתוכם, כי לכל עם בשגגה. ונשלח לכל עדת בני ישראל, ולגר הגר בתוכם, כי לכל עם בשגגה. ונשלח לכל עדת בני ישראל, ולגר הגר בתוכם, כי לכל עם בשגגה. סלח נא לעוונם הזה כגודל חסדך, וכאשר נשאת לעם הזה ממצרים ידענו, ושם נאמר, ויאמר אדוני, סלחתי כדברך, ויאמר אדוני, סלחתי כדברך, ויאמר אדוני, סלחתי כדברך. Alan Coppell will lead us in the reading on page 401 over Zoom.
Make us honest enough to recognize our transgressions, big enough to admit them, strong enough to forsake them. Humble us by showing us what we are, exalt us with a vision of what we may yet grow to be. Keep us ever mindful of our dependence upon you and help us to understand your need of us. United with you in a holy partnership, may we dedicate our lives to your law of love. Help us to create homes filled with joy and harmony. and to labor for peace among communities and nations. On this sacred night, grant us atonement and help us to find serenity within ourselves. Kindle within us the fires of faith and set aglow our courage to live the words we pray.
Amen. Shkoyach. And on page 400, please everybody join me in the Shehechianu. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehecheyanu ekimanu eigionu lazeman hazeh. Amen. We will return our Sifrei Torah to the Ark, and Karen, if you would come up and close the Ark doors for us. And we remain standing for just a minute more as we turn to page 408 for the call to prayer for the Baruch Hu.
Baruch Adonai Amelech Leolam Ohed.
You may be seated. We continue on that page. Umavir yom, umevi laila, umavril ben yom, umavril laila, Adonai tzvaot, shemo el chai v'kayam, tamid yimloch aleinu leolam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai.
Baruch Shalom.
Mamariv aravim. We turn to page 410.
Ahavat olam Beit Yisrael Amecha ahavta Torah u'mitzvot Chukim mishpatim Otanu limadeta Al ken Adonai Eloheinu V'shofreinu v'kumeinu Natzliach b'chukecha ונשמח בדברי תורתך ובמצוותיך לעולם ועד. Yomam v'layla, Yomam v'layla. ואהבתך אל תסיר ממנו לעולמים. ברוך אתה אדוני, אוהב עמו ישראל.
Return to page 412 for Shema. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Baruch Shem, Kevod Malchuto. Et Adonai Elohecha, v'chol levavcha, uv'chol nafshecha, uv'chol me'otecha, v'hayu hadvarim ha'ele, asher anochi mitzavecha, hayom al levavecha, v'shinantam levanecha, v'dibarta bam, v'shivtecha b'veitecha, ולכתך בדרך, ושוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובישעריך.
It's our privilege to invite up Jane and Erwin Rosenston to lead us in the second paragraph of the Shema in English on page 415.
If you will faithfully obey the commandments which I command you this day, to love the Lord your God and serve God with all your heart and with all your soul, then I will favor your land with rain at the proper season, in autumn and in spring, and you will harvest your grain and wine and oil. I will give grass in the fields for your cattle. You will eat and be satisfied. Take care not to be lured away to worship other gods, for then the wrath of the Lord will be directed against you. God will close the heavens and there will be no rain. The earth will not yield its produce, and you will soon perish from the good land which the Lord gave you. Therefore, keep these words of mine in your heart and in your soul. Bind them as a sign upon your arm, and let them be a reminder above your eyes. Teach them to your children, speaking of them when you are at home and when you are away, when you lie down at night and when you rise up in the morning. Write them upon the doorposts of your home and upon your gates. Thus your days and the days of your children will be multiplied on the land which the Lord promised to your ancestors for as long as the heavens remain over the earth.
We continue on page 416. Vayomer Adonai el Moshe lemor, daber el bnei Yisrael, v'amarta alehem, v'asu lahem tzitzit, al kanfei vigdehem v'dorotam v'natnu, al tzitzit hakanaf b'til tehelet v'haya lahem b'tzitzit u'reitem oto u'zchartem et kol mitzvot Adonai v'asitem otam v'lo taturu acharei levavchem v'acharei einechem asher tem zonim acharechem למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי והייתם קדושים לבביכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות להם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם Adonai Elohechem Emet.
We continue near the bottom of the first big paragraph on page 418. וראו בניו גבורתו, שיבחו והודו לשמו. ומלכותו ברצון קיבלו עליהם משה ומרים ובני ישראל הכנו שירה בשמחה רבה ואמרו כולם מי כמוך באלים אדוני מי כמוך נטר בקודש נורות תהילות אוסף אלף מלכותך רנו בניך בוקע היום לפני משה ומרים זה לי ענו ואמרו אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד ונאמר כי ודע אדוני את יעקב הוא גאלו מיד חזק ממנו ברוך אתה אדוני גאל ישראל In our liturgy, we have just passed through the narrowness of the Reed Sea, and somebody very observant, by the way, asked me why I had no shoes on this evening. And the reason is that for me, Yom Kippur is all about being as present as I possibly can to the world around me. And there is a commandment in the Torah saying, "Ve'initem et nafshotechem," that your bodies should go through a little bit of hardship on this day. And in some of the rabbinic tradition, that includes not wearing shoes made out of leather. So to me, keeping my feet bare allows me to use senses that I don't usually get to use on Yom Kippur, and it opens that up for me. So thank you, clever person, for asking that question. We are going to hear right now from Lisa Herzl about something connected to the next piece of our liturgy tonight, the Hashkivenu, which is a prayer for protection. And having come out of the Shema, where we learn about our responsibility towards the land and how the land will reflect when we are not living up to our end of the bargain, and connecting that to protection for people who are vulnerable, she's got some important words to share with us. So let's listen to Lisa for a moment.
Hi everyone, I'm Lisa and I'm a member of the Social Action Committee, and one thing we decided we would like our focus to be this year is on hunger and food scarcity. And actually, one of the issues we kind of chose to focus on was free school lunches for all children. So prior to COVID, students could qualify for free and reduced lunch based on family situation, but there was a significant amount of paperwork and steps that needed to be taken for many families to qualify for this. I know this personally because I have been a public school teacher. I'm going into my 14th year now, and I've seen over the years many students who would greatly benefit from this, who just, their families, for whatever reason, just barely don't qualify, they don't fill out the paperwork, those kind of things. During COVID, they actually made all school lunches free for any student, regardless of financial status. And there was a bill put forth to extend that indefinitely. They have extended it for one more school year, which is awesome, but I would love to see that, and I believe many others as well, would love to see that extended forever for everyone. And also, food scarcity is an issue that affects people beyond just students in schools who don't meet those needs. So that is an issue that the Social Action Committee has chosen to kind of put our focus in. And so stay tuned for more ways that we will be getting involved in that. Thank you.
We remember people who are not able to choose and who don't have that option and who are experiencing it as a function of privation and want. And in your high holiday stuff that you got were some materials for Mazon. And so I encourage you on this Yom Kippur to think about ways that you might be able to help join in that struggle to help people who need to eat, especially our most vulnerable, our young kids. Thank you so much, Lisa, for that. And we take that kavanah, we take that intention, and we move now into the Hashkivenu, this prayer for protection, which is on page 420 in your Machzor. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom ve'amidenu malkeinu l'chaim ufros aleinu Sukat shelomecha v'taknenu b'eitza tova milefanecha ve'oshienu leman shemecha. Ufros aleinu sukat shlomecha, baruch atah Adonai, haporei sukat shalom aleinu, ve'al kol yamo Yisrael, ve'al Yerushalayim. At the bottom of that page, we get our Ikar of Yom Kippur, our essence of Yom Kippur. The last two lines. Ki vayom hazeh yechaper aleichem litaher etchem mikol chatoteichem lifnei Adonai titharu.
And now we continue with the Chatzi Kaddish on page 422. Yitkadal ve'yitkadash Shemei Rabah Ve'alma דברו חירותי, וימליך מלכותי, בחייכון וביומייכון, ובחיי דכל בית ישראל, בגלות זמן קריב, ויאמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מברך לעולם, ולעולמי עולמיה יתברך. יתברך וישתבח, ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא, ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל, שמי דקודשא בריחו לעילא ולעילא. מן כל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה, דמירם ויהללה, ויאמרו אמן.
We rise now in body or spirit, and we prepare for our silent Amidah, which you will find on pages 424 and following.
Adonai sefatai tiftach ufi agitahilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise.
If you are still davening, still praying privately, please continue. If you are ready to rejoin us for Shalom Rav, we're on page 432, and Rachel Hansen is going to lead us in this beautiful prayer.
Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Ne'olam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Ne'olam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Ne'olam. Ki ata hu melech Adon lechol hashalom. Ki ata hu melech Adon lechol hashalom. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Le'olam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Le'olam. V'tov beinecha levarech et amcha Yisrael bechol עת ובכל שעה בשלומך. רב על ישראל עמך תשים לעולם. שלום רב על ישראל עמך תשים לעולם. שלום רב על ישראל עמך תשים לעולם. שלום רב על ישראל עמך תשים לעולם. תשים לעולם. תשים לעולם.
בספר חיים ברכה ושלום ופרנסה טובה ניזכר וניכתב לפניך. אנחנו בכל עמך בית ישראל לחיים טובים, לחיים טובים ולשלום. ברוך אתה אדוני עושה השלום. Please be seated. In the height of late June's heat wave, I stood on top of the retaining wall behind my house, watering rock plants. I watered the garden every day that week, sometimes twice a day. Maybe you guys remember that week, it was hot. My skin was scorching, the plants were brown, they were droopy, and as I turned the hose on the rocky soil under each plant, I could see the water absorb into the thirsty ground. The plant stems swelled a little bit before my eyes. I had a moment of flashing power. I felt godlike. The water I was giving them was the difference between their life and their death. I could see it. What I did mattered. This year, from mask wearing to vaccination to careful planning of gatherings, each day of life in a world shaped by COVID-19 has reminded us that what we do matters. Each choice has, to me, felt that it had the power to impact somebody else's survival. Those kinds of stakes can feel very scary, even paralyzing, and we spoke about this fear at our last High Holy Day services. Individual choices are very important in Jewish tradition. In Bereshit, or Genesis chapter 18, Abraham bargains with God, right? If there are 50 righteous people to be found in the city of Sodom, condemned for its xenophobia, will God abandon God's plan for destruction? What about if there are 45? What about 40, 35, and so on until Abraham bargains God down to 10? This story is actually one of our sources for the number that makes a minyan, the minimum quorum of community to say Kaddish, to make the call to prayer, the Barchu, and to repeat an Amidah out loud, and to read Torah publicly from a scroll. And I think this story asks a really important question. How many righteous individuals does it take to save a community that is doing something dangerous? How do we weight the power of individual action against communal action? Who counts? Whose actions count? Judaism is also very strongly a religion of communal behavior. Al tifrosh min hatzibur, Rabbi Hillel warns us in Pirkei Avot. Don't separate yourself from the community. And our prayers, all of them, almost without exception, use the language of we. Our holy texts of oral Torah, the Mishnah and the Talmud, default to the majority opinion in halachic or legal matters, even as they respectfully preserve individual dissents. Jewish tradition understands that while individuals like Moshe Rabbeinu and the prophet Devorah and Miriam can model and can inspire, group action drives both habit and change. This Jewish perspective feels particularly instructive to me this year, as I consider both our country's ongoing process of climbing out of the pit that COVID has dug for us, and the hate crimes that have plagued America in general and the Merrimack Valley in particular. And I think it's impossible this fall to consider the question of communal responsibility without talking about the US withdrawal from Kabul and the Taliban tidal wave that threatens, among so much else, to tear away opportunities for education, employment, and social freedom that Afghan women and girls have poured themselves into these past 20 years. First, COVID. My eldest son, Jonathan, said one night in July at our dinner table, I hope someday we'll only have 10 unvaccinated people. If we're really lucky, I hope someday we'll only have 5 unvaccinated people. If all but a few of us are doing what we hear from scientists and doctors that we're supposed to do, does that majority count? Jonathan learned this year, at 6 years old, that communal safety is created by communities acting entirely together, and that when a pandemic is in play, even a small number of people opting out without medical reason to do so can create a really grave risk for the rest. COVID has been a hard voice against our dearly beloved and deeply held American ideal of individualism. This is a pandemic in which any one of us getting vaccinated and masking and distancing and doing all these things personally is critical. And our own choices are not enough to keep any one of us safe. Everyone around us also needs to do those things. It's a bitter pill to swallow, and I also beg anybody who is watching who is able to get vaccinated, please do so. Our need for strong, safe community norms is reinforced by the hate crimes our community has witnessed in these past months. Homophobia, racism, and anti-Semitism have each been given visible platforms this summer. In Nashua, in Haverhill, in North Andover, in Lowell, in Winthrop, in Brighton, in Framingham, the list goes on. Swastikas were used this summer in North Andover in 2 probably unrelated incidents. One was very clearly anti-Semitic, and one was a homophobic death threat. Hate is intersectional too. A single person can sow fear and horror. It takes the whole village to make hate's expressions unthinkable and to teach people not to hate in the first place. That is why we celebrate Martin Luther King Jr. Shabbat each year with Calvary Baptist Church. That is why we learn about one another. That is why the presence of interfaith friends and neighbors is so important to us here each year at Yom HaShoah. It takes all of us. Community action makes healing from hate and prevention of hate possible. The vigil I led in North Andover after the swastikas was co-organized by founders of the North Andover Pride Project. Members of our social action committee signed up to volunteer at the Merrimack Valley Black and Brown Voices markets after their Haverhill event was targeted this summer. And I remember the day after the New Zealand mosque massacre, a group of temple members went to the Islamic Society of Greater Haverhill at their request so that we could be present with them in prayer. We sat, we spoke, we witnessed, and we shared sorrow. This summer, a friend of mine said once that the safest they had ever felt in a time rife with anti-Semitism was walking up to the door of their shul for Kol Nidrei night, like tonight, and seeing rows of interfaith community members guarding their way. Nobody was armed. Everybody was trained in de-escalation. It was just a lot of people showing up to say, we have your back while you pray. Close relationships that support human rights can, of course, be international, which begets more responsibility in places of physical danger. The public outcry over America's withdrawal from Afghanistan, leaving a shameful number of translators and fixers and their families endangered, acknowledges American responsibility towards Afghans who partnered with us in an attempt, however flawed, we could argue forever probably about that, but an attempt to help Afghanistan build up a more democratic and a more egalitarian society. The volume of the protest speaks to the depth of our failure towards these people. Giving, asking, and accepting the help of an international community to protect human rights also doesn't imply impotence. Afghans were and are and must be the center of their own liberation movements. As photographer Rada Akbar says, the history of Afghan women didn't start after 2001. We have a long and rich past to which women have always contributed. Afghan women have been pioneers of educational and social initiatives. Journalist Gail Tzemach Lemon's 2011 book, The Dressmaker of Khair Khana, chronicles Camilla Siddiqui and her 4 sisters who created this really robust dressmaking business and school inside their families' homes under Taliban rule in Kabul. Starting with their own households, they eventually trained and employed over 100 Afghan women who were then able to provide for their families. And Camilla went on to found Kawayan Business Development Solutions and trained over 10,000 Afghan entrepreneurs, many of them women. Camilla herself became a government minister, serving first as Deputy Chief of Staff and then as Afghan Deputy Commerce Minister. My sister Lucia spent a year in Kabul from 2006 to 2007, and she remembers women rushing forwards into the opportunities that had opened up for them. Since the Taliban swept back to power, crowds of women have demonstrated in the streets for their rights, despite consistent and sometimes violent opposition. Protests have actually been outlawed, and yet these women and some men at their side continue to demonstrate for their freedoms. Camilla Siddiqui was evacuated from Afghanistan on a private plane on August 15th. We should not fall into the hubristic trap of saying that somebody else's liberation is something that only we can achieve, right? That it depends entirely on us. But neither, I think, should we say, having learned of oppression and grave danger to other people in a situation in which we ourselves have considerable power, we shouldn't say that's not my problem. America's engagement with Afghanistan has shifted from military to what I would call at this point humanitarian, but I believe we still have skin in this game. As the Gemara teaches in Brachot, "En chavush matir atzmo mibeit ha'asurim." If somebody is kept by force under oppressive conditions, they can't usually free themselves from a prison. The plight of Americans and Afghans in mortal danger within Kabul and those who have made it to American soil, I think that is our problem as Americans. Our temple has an opportunity this fall to join with other interfaith partners to offer support to arriving Afghan refugees in the Merrimack Valley. And in the next week, you're going to hear from me about options for offering them that support. So I invite you on this Yom Kippur to think about what your own capacity is in this moment and how you might want to respond. Even the boldest of individuals, like Camilla, cannot, I think, change community action or norms, community norms on their own. Take me. I can teach a new tune for Lecha Dodi until I'm blue in the face. I often do, but it's not our community's song until you all start singing it back to me. We shouldn't exaggerate our own influence But also, I think we must not discount our individual potential to catalyze communal change, to start that reaction. Jewish tradition gives us really strong and successful examples of both kinds. One famous example, Jewish example of an individual is Nachshon ben Amminadab, who with fear and faith in his heart steps into the waters of the Reed Sea as the Israelites flee Egypt. This is according to the Talmud. Only then does the miracle of the parting of the waters begin and the people are able to cross. Perhaps even more appropriate to our times, Yiddish author and satirist David Frischman published a story in 1912, and it was called Three Who Ate. A cholera epidemic ravages a country, and a rabbi stands on the bima and begs his congregation on Yom Kippur Day not to fast so as to stay alive. He cites pikuach nefesh, and he asks them until his voice gives out. And they refuse until he and the two other clergy on the bima eat and drink in front of the people. They have to be the first to do it. And the narrator says, and all the Jews ate that day. They ate and they wept. Instruction and request in this situation didn't cut it, and sometimes they don't. Modeling was the only successful option for leadership in that moment. There are risky times that require this kind of leading by example rather than by consensus, but also the community has to be ready to say yes to that moment and to take that action together. To me, the most exciting model of leadership and responsibility is communal and individual, with both working explicitly in dialogue. This spring, I spent 6 weeks learning part of a Talmud daf, or a double-sided page, in Rosh Hashanah 25a, online with Svara, a traditionally radical yeshiva. And this daf tells a powerful story. Two witnesses come to attest that they have seen the new moon, and they're trying to help fix the calendar for the year so that everybody knows when the months begin and when the holidays are going to happen. But what they say shows very clearly that they did not, in fact, see the new moon. They saw the waning end of the previous month, and they have made a mistake. But Rabban Gamliel, who is the leader of the Sanhedrin, accepts their testimony anyways. He says, all right, we're going to say that was a new moon. We're going to calculate our calendar like this. Thank you very much, witnesses. And a couple of the rabbis around him protest. They say, this isn't right. We can tell they've made a mistake. Rabban Gamliel turns on one of them, Rabbi Yehoshua, and he says, I decree for you that you are going to come to my house. You're going to leave your own house, carrying your stick and your bag of money, two things that on Yom Kippur, according to Orthodoxy, one should definitely not be carrying anywhere, let alone out of one's house. You're going to come over to my house with those things on the Yom Kippur that we calculate according to your reckoning, Rabbi Yehoshua. You feel so strongly about this calendar thing, I'm going to make you break Yom Kippur if you don't accord with the communal calendar that I'm setting out for you. Rabbi Yehoshua ruefully acknowledges Rabban Gamliel's authority to set these kinds of communal norms as important as the calendar. And he goes back in his head to a text from Leviticus, from Vayikra, which says, Eile moadei Adonai mikra'e kodesh asher tikra'u otam. And this means these are the appointed times, these are the festivals of God, which are called holy, mikra'e kodesh, which you, otam, the Israelite people are calling holy. So these things that you call holy, they are holy. And Rabbi Akiva goes on, in fact, to reinterpret this. And he says, Bein bismanan, whether these festivals are celebrated on their correct times, Bein shelo bismanan, or whether they're not celebrated on their correct times, Ein li moadot ele elu. He's speaking with God's voice and saying, I have no festivals. I have no holy times except for the ones that my people, my community designate by agreeing that they're going to celebrate them on that day. And Rabbi Akiva doubles down on this. He puns off of 3 occurrences of the word otam, which means them or the festivals, and he revocalizes it, because you can do that with Torah if you want. You can add different vowels, and he revocalizes it to atem, which is Hebrew for y'all. And he says, y'all have the power to establish these dates. Y'all, atem, even if you have mistakenly set the wrong date, y'all, atem, even if you set the wrong date on purpose, don't know why, y'all, atem, even if you're led astray by false witnesses, y'all create the festival dates by agreeing together on when to observe them. And this is radical. I mean, what do you mean, Rabban Gamliel and Rabbi Akiva, that we get to set the calendar, that we can just kind of set aside these months and dates that are in Torah, and that God's self is saying, these aren't my festivals until you tell me they are? We're puny mortals. How does this work? How can we play fast and loose with holy time like this? But I see in this Talmud sugya a powerful mutual model of responsibility. God sets out the holy days in Torah pretty clearly, but the people are also told we have to create them by calling them holy, by observing them, by setting their dates through systems that encourage communal human buy-in and participation. Those witnesses are so important to this process. People have to agree these are going to be our dates. And this gives a whole new interpretation, by the way, a whole new intention to our temple's yearly calendar meeting. So like the proverbial tree falling alone in the woods with nobody to hear it, if a holy day happens and nobody observes it, was it really a holy day? This Talmud seems to me to say, no, it wasn't. And so too is the mitzvah of hearing a shofar on the high holy days. The shofar is sounded by a flesh and blood person, but the mitzvah, the commandment, is not to blow, it's to hear. Both the Baalat, Tokea, the shofar blower, and the person who hears are equally integral to the performance of the mitzvah of the shofar. And so I see God centering mitzvot which require catalyzation, which require cooperation, and which require coordination, people working together to accomplish them. We can't do the things that matter most to us without relationships of mutual support. And with those relationships, everything is possible. Perhaps this can be our kavanah, our intention for this coming year. Every Jewish prayer service ends with an Aleinu, which created in medieval times for Rosh Hashanah, we believe, quickly became so beloved that it's part of each one of our services. And each time we come together in the Aleinu, we say, it's on us, Aleinu. It is up to us in partnership with God to repair this world. Each one of us and all of us have the power to write one another into the book of life. It is on us. So when I watered those rock plants, it wasn't just me. It was the communal clean water reservoir, the town pipes, the garden society who grew those plants in the first place. And yet, the water didn't flow until my hand turned on the spigot. All life, just like all holiness, is a team effort. May each one of us be blessed this year to emulate God's example of choosing and supporting life and growth. May we be blessed to partner with one another in this holy team sport of mutual responsibility, where nobody is left behind. Gamar Chatima Tova, may you be sealed for a good year. We turn now to page 446. And if you'd like transliteration, it's in your supplement on page 19 for the piyut Ya'aleh. And tonight we're going to be singing the first two and the last two verses on that page, on 446. Ya'aleh, Ya'aleh, Tahanuneinu, Me'erev, Ve'yavo Shamatenu, Miboker, Me'erarinu Neinu, Anarev, Ve'yerarinu Neinu, Anarev. We turn now to page 454, and please rise in body or spirit as we sing together the Shalosh Esrei Midot, the 13 attributes of God on which we throw ourselves in these high holy days. Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum v'Chanun, Erech Habayim, Rav Chesed v'Emet, Notzer Chesed la'olavim, Nosei avon la'fesha, v'chata v'nakeh. Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum v'Chanun, Erech Habayim, Rav Chesed v'Emet, Notzer Chesed la'olavim, Nosei avon la'fesha, v'chata v'nakeh. Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum v'Chanun, Erech Habayim, V'Rav Chesed v'Emet, Notzer Chesed la'olavim, Nosei avon la'fesha, v'chata v'nakeh. וסלחת לעווננו וחטאתנו, ונחלתנו. We remain standing, and I call up Shirley Holber to open our Aron, our Ark, as we prepare to chant Shema Kolenu together on page 458. Shema, 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 Shema Kolenu, Adonai Eloheinu, Chuz v'rachem aleinu, Mekabel v'rachamim uratzon et tefilateinu. Shema, Shema, Kolenu. ונשובה חדש ימינו, חדש ימינו כקדם. שמה שמה גולנו, שמה שמה גולנו, שמה שמה גולנו, שמה שמה, שמה שמה גולנו. אל תשליכנו מלפניך, ברוח קודשך אל תיקח, אל תיקח, אל תיקח ממנו, אל תיקח ממנו. שמה שמה קולנו, שמה שמה קולנו, שמה שמה קולנו, שמה שמה, שמה שמה קולנו. אל תשליכנו כעת זקנה, כי כלות כוחנו, אל תעזבנו, אל תעזבנו, אל תעזבנו, אל תשליכנו כעת זקנה, אל תרחק ממנו. שמה שמה קולנו, שמה שמה קולנו, שמה שמה קולנו, שמה שמה, שמה שמה קולנו. You can be seated. We turn to page 460, and this is going to be a new tune. So join us in doing it as a nigun, a wordless melody, before we launch into the words. Ki anu amecha. Eloheinu Elohei avotenu veimotenu, salach lanu, mechal lanu, kaper lanu. Yai dai 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 yai dai 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 yai dai 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 yai dai dai yai dai dai yai dai 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 yai dai dai yai dai dai yai dai dai yai dai 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 yai dai Anu nachalatecha ve'ata goraleinu. Anu tzonecha ve'ata roeinu. Anu charmecha ve'ata notreinu. Anu te'ulatecha ve'ata yotzreinu. Yai dai 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 dai. Yai dai 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 dai. Yai dai 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 dai. Yai dai 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 dai. Yai dai 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 dai. Anu raihatecha ve'ata dodeinu. Anu segulatecha ve'ata kehoveinu. Anu amecha ve'ata malkeinu. Anu mamirecha ve'ata mamireinu. Yai dai 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 dai. Yai dai 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 dai. Yai dai 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 dai. Yai dai 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 dai. Yai dai 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 dai. Yai dai 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 dai. For our reading on page 21 of the supplement, I invite up Carol Tott to read this beautiful poem by Devon Spear.
Weeds, a poem by Devon Spear. Weeds, spelled W-E-E-D-S. Only weeds, and yet to the untrained eye, fingers crawling, roots sprawling, the stretch too thin, nonetheless outstretched, exalting. There is still God to be found here.
We continue on page 462. Eloheinu ve'Elohei avotenu ve'imotenu, tavo lefanecha, tefilatenu, ve'al titala mitchinatenu, she'ein anachnu azei fanim ukshei oref, lamar lefanecha. Adonai Eloheinu, Elohei avotenu ve'imotenu, tzadikim anachnu ve'lo chatanu, aval anachnu chatanu.
Zadnu, Chamasnu, Tefalnu Sheker, Yatznu Ra, Gizavnu, Latznu, Maradnu, Niatznu, Sararnu, Avinu, Ashanu, Sararnu, Ishinu Horeh, Rashanu, Shichatnu, Tiavnu, Tahinu, Titanu,
You may be seated. Return the page to 464, paragraph in the middle. Man omar lefanecha yoshev marom, uman nisaper lefanecha shochen shechakim, alo kol hanisarot vehaniglot, ata yodea. We turn back now to page 436 for the Al-Khait, the longer confessional. The transliteration for this is in your supplements on page 22, if you want to follow along there. And again, we rise in body or in spirit on page 436 for this responsive confessional. Al-Khait shechaptanu lefanecha be'ones u'ratzon.
Al-Khait shechaptanu lefanecha b'imutz halev.
Al-Khait shechaptanu lefanecha b'vli dat.
Al-Khait shechaptanu lefanecha b'vituri safatayim.
Al-Khait shechaptanu lefanecha b'gilui harayot.
Al-Khait shechaptanu lefanecha b'gilui rasateh.
Al-Khait shechaptanu lefanecha b'dat u'b'mirma.
Al-Khait shechaptanu lefanecha b'dibur pei.
Al-Khait shechaptanu lefanecha b'honat reah.
Al-Khait shechaptanu lefanecha b'harhor halev.
Al-Khait shechaptanu lefanecha b've'idat znut.
Al-Khait shechaptanu lefanecha b'vidui pei.
Al-Khait shechaptanu lefanecha b'zilzul horim u'morit.
Al-Khait shechaptanu lefanecha b'zadon u'vishkaga.
Al-Khait shechaptanu lefanecha b'chozek yad.
Al-Khait shechaptanu lefanecha b'hilul Hashem.
Al-Khait shechaptanu lefanecha b'tume'at sifatayim.
Al-Khait shechaptanu lefanecha b'tishut pei.
Al-Khait shechaptanu lefanecha b'yetzer hara.
Al-Khait שחטאנו לפניך, יודעים ולא יודעים. ועל כולם אלך סליחות, סלח לנו לנו, כפר לנו. ועל כולם אלך סליחות, סלח לנו לנו, סלח לנו לנו, כפר לנו. על הן שחטאנו לפניך, בכך אשוב חזכיו. על הן שחטאנו לפניך, בכפר שוחד. ועל הן שחטאנו לפניך ברצון. ועל הן שחטאנו לפניך בלשון הרע. על הן שחטאנו לפניך במסע ובמתן. ועל הן שחטאנו לפניך במאכל ומשתה. על הן שחטאנו לפניך בנשך ובמרביץ. ועל הן שחטאנו לפניך בנטילת גרון. על הן שחטאנו לפניך בשיח שפתותינו. ועל הן שחטאנו לפניך בסיקור עין. על הן שחטאנו לפניך בעיניים רמות. ועל הן שחטאנו לפניך בעזות מצח. ועל כולם אלך סליחות, סלח לנו לנו, כפר לנו. ועל כולם אלך סליחות, סלח לנו לנו, סלח לנו לנו, כפר לנו.
על חטא שחטאנו לפניך בפריקת עול.
ועל הן שחטאנו לפניך בבהילות.
על חטא שחטאנו לפניך בצדיעת רע.
ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך בצרות עין.
על חטא שחטאנו לפניך בקלות ראש.
ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך בקשיות עורף.
על חטא שחטאנו לפניך בריצת רגליים להרע.
ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך ברכילות.
על חטא שחטאנו לפניך בשבועת שווא.
ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך בשנאת חינם.
על חטא שחטאנו לפניך בתשומת יד.
ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך בתימהון לבב. ועל כולם אלך סליחות, סלח לנו לנו, כפר לנו. ועל כולם אלך
There's going to be a lot of standing between now and the end of the service. Please take care of your bodies, do what feels good for them. And at this time, I'd like to invite up Sunny and Diane Foreman to open our ark before Avinu Malkeinu. You'll find Avinu Malkeinu on page 472 in your Machzor, and the transliteration is in your supplement, page 23.
Avinu Malkeinu, Shema Koleinu. Avinu Malkeinu, Atanu Lefanecha. Avinu Malkeinu, Amol Aleinu. Avinu Malkeinu, Galei Kotzar, Umastin, Me'aleinu. Avinu Malkeinu, Avinu Malkeinu, Kotvenu Besefer Hayim Tovim. Avinu Malkeinu, Atesh Aleinu, Atesh Aleinu. Shana Tova. Avinu, Avinu Malkeinu, Aram, Aram, Karen, Israel Amecha. Avinu Malkeinu, Oneinu ve'aneinu, Ki ein banu Masihim, Aseh imanu, Aseh imanu. Tzedakah v'hesed v'hoshienu. Avinu Malkeinu, Shema Koleinu.
We turn now to page 476 and remain standing in body or in spirit for the Kaddish Shalem.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה,
Amen.
ועלמא דברה חירותי וימליך מלכותי, וחייכונו ויומכונו וחיי לכל בית ישראל, בגלו וזמן קורי ויאמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מבורך, לעולם ולעולמי עלמיה יתברך. יתברך וישתבח, יתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא, יתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל, שמי דקודשו ברכו. לעילא ולעילא מן כל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה, דמירון ועלמא ויאמרו אמן. תתקבל צלות הון ובאות ההון לכל ישראל, קדום אבהם דיבי שמיה, יאמרו אמן. יהי שלום רבה משמיה, וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל, יאמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ועל כל יושבי תבל, יאמרו אמן.
To open the ark before the Aleinu, we call up Barbara Berg. As we take both the responsibilities and the joys Aleinu upon us of this coming year.
עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם. ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא, שהוא נוטה שמיים ויוסד הארץ, ומושב עיקרו בשמיים ממעל, ושכינתו זו בגלחי מרומים. הוא אלוהינו אין עוד, אמת מלכנו אפס זולתו, כך כתוב בתורתו, ידעת היום וידעת היום והשיבות אל לבבך. כי אדוני הוא האלוהים פום 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 בשמיים ממעל, ועל הארץ ועל הארץ מתחת, אין עוד, אין עוד. כך כתוב בתורתך, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד, ונאמר, והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו
We come now to the Kaddish Yatom, the mourner's Kaddish. And on this Kol Nidrei evening, before we say Kaddish together, I'm going to read the names of those folks in our community who have died since the last Yom Kippur. And if there are people who you are remembering, who you are thinking about tonight, please say their names aloud. Please put them in the chat if you're online, if you want other people to know your person or your people. And then we'll say Kaddish together. We remember with love Marvin Bakerman, Harold Barr, Gary Baden, Murray Belsky, Annette Burakoff, Saul Fleeter, Richard Gorovitz, Elaine Hirschberg, Cheryl Levine, Eric Medoff, Leon Miller, Mark Rubin, Alvin Siegel, Pauline Siegel, Martin Shalek, John Shiovitz, Barbara Silberman, Helen Carol Whitehead. And with love and with honor, we turn to page 482, and together we speak the Kaddish Yatom. If you're in mourning, if you're recalling a yahrzeit, or if it's your custom, please be on your feet physically or spiritually for this. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, be'alma divra chirutei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayeichon uvyomeichon uv'chayei dechol beit Yisrael, ba'agala uvizman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei shemech Rabbah mevarach le'alam u'lalmei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yit'aleh v'yitalal shmet kudsha b'richu la'ela ul'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata da'amiran be'alma v'imru amen. Yehei shalom Rabbah min shemaya v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav. Hu yaseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'al kol yoshevei tevel v'imru amen. May the memories of our beloved ones be for a blessing in us and in the world. Please be seated.
Oseh shalom b'mromav. Hu yaseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'al kol yoshvei tevel. Oseh shalom b'mromav. Hu yaseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'al kol yoshvei tevel. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'al kol yoshvei tevel. Amen.
Thank you for spending this Kol Nidrei evening together in community with us. Here. We want to thank HC Media for broadcasting this service on Channel 22, helping so many other people be part of it. We want to let you know about some exciting things coming up this fall, programs for young families, J-Play, and Raising Jewish Children. We have some classes. There's an adult B'nai Mitzvah class and Liturgy of Shabbat. And starting on October 17th, we're really excited for this year's author series co-sponsored by Adult Ed and Hasifriya. Our first author will be Ayelet Gunder Goshen, author of Waking Lions, and that will be on at 10 a.m. on the 17th by Zoom. We're also delighted to be running a Yiddish cultural series this year in partnership with Congregation Or Atid of Wayland. And the first event in that series will be on Monday, October 18th, Yiddish 101, an introduction to the Yiddish language, all about Yiddish, where it came from, its components, its uses, with Dr. Mindel Cohen of the Great Yiddish Book Center. And that is on Monday, October 18th in the evening. We want to thank our incredible musicians for tonight, David Collins and Sarah Freiberg Ellison, who will hear again after Yigdal in a beautiful postlude to play us out into the rest of the evening, into the beginning of our fast. And of course, my incredible Bima partners, rabbinic intern Eli Pripas, Shaliach Tzibur Phil Platkow, and we want to lift up the work of our executive director, Nancy LaFleur, and our custodian, Don Kumas, without whom none of this would be possible, as well as all of the many, many members who contributed to making these services happen. So on page 486, you will find Yigdal, with which our liturgy will conclude for the evening, but please keep listening to a really special musical piece. יגדל אלוהים חי וישתבח, נמצא בעיני אל מציאותו, אחד אין יחיד כייחודו, לעולם וגם אין סוף לאחדותו, אין לו דמות הגוף ואינו גוף, לא נערוך אליו קדושתו, אדמון לכל דבר אשר נברא ראשון ואין ראשית לראשיתו, הינו אדון עולם לכל נוצר, נורא גדולתו ומלכותו, שפע נבואתו אמנו-אל, אנשי סגולתו ותפארתו, תוכם בישראל כמו שעוד נביא ומביט את אמונתו, תורת אמת נתן לעמו-אל על יד נביאו, למען ביתו לא יחל יפאר ולא ימיר דתו, לעולמים לזולתו, צופה ויודע צאצאינו, עדים בסוף דבר וקדמתו, קומל לאיש חסד כמפעלו, נותן להשערה כרישתו, ישלח לקיץ ימים משיחנו לפדות בחקקץ ישועתו, מתים יחייל ברוב חסדו, ברוך הדעת שתהילתו, מתים יחייל ברוב חסדו, ברוך הדעת שם תהילתו. Tzom kal, an easy fast if you are fasting. May your night be as beautiful as that was. May your fast be easy if you fast. And we hope to see you back tomorrow at 9 in the morning. This concludes our service for this evening. Gamar Chatima Tova. May you be sealed for a good year.